Hard work. Who doesn't love hard work? Give me more hard work. I don't know. For some reason, I'm making a couple of these videos, and for some reason, singing is coming through for me. So let's go with it, right? A few days ago, I had a wonderful conversation with Christine Volden, and Christine was someone who I met just a few weeks ago, and she showed up. She actually showed up as an amazing rebel, someone who's been able to create success her way time and time again. And one of the things I love from our conversation was how she has this great blend of doing things in her own unique way while still being true to the underlying principles that govern things. I'll use this as an example. Like, if you want to get from where you are to the town next door, you're going to have to travel some miles. Whether you do that by bike, whether you do it by foot, whether you do it by jump rope or skipping or taking a car or taking a bus, whatever it is, you see how there's all these the ways that you get there. That's up to you. But we cannot deny the fundamental principle that distance must be traveled. She's such a rebel, and yet she's able to make sure that she does it in a way that respects the underlying principles of it all. And then every once in a while, she challenges those too. I think the reason I'm really excited, one of the reasons I'm really excited for you to participate in this conversation with us is that she has an element of ease that comes into her. She's a master when it comes to sales. She's a master at helping people in a number of varieties in terms of actually getting out there and selling to their clients. And I wanted to say enroll, but in our conversations that we've had from this here and beyond, we've had some discussions around just that word selling. So I'm going to say it. Sell, 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 sell. And I'm going to invite you, before we even start here, how does that make you feel? I'll invite you to check in with yourself. Do you have an adversity to even just that word? Does that make you feel a little, And if so, play with that emotion as you go ahead and watch our conversation. Because there's something that you have to offer to the world. It's a reason why you're an outlier. It's the reason why you're a pioneer. It's the reason why you're a maverick. You have the ability to change the world. And we need to make sure that you can get the financial means that allow you to focus on this and allow you to stay safe as you continue to be brave in the world. Sell, 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 sell. I love it. Go ahead. We are participating in this conversation together. So leave a message wherever you're watching this here. Leave a message, leave a comment, ask a question, put in your insights, whatever it is. Don't let the conversation die here. And it doesn't matter if you're watching this the day after it came out or if you're watching this years afterwards. The conversation lives on because it's an important conversation. It's something that we all go through. Without further ado, here's the conversation with Christine Volden.
Hello there, outliers, pioneers, and mavericks. How are you here? Niiamahashong, and I'm really excited because today I get to sit with an outlier, a pioneer, a maverick, a rebel, Christine Volden. Christine, thank you so much for joining the conversation.
And yeah, so happy to be here and talk about this.
It's great. It's great to have you here. I think as we're even speaking, I can feel myself right now just trying to settle not into being a presenter or a show person. I've done podcasts in the past where it's like, all right, so let's find out more about who you are and such. And so it's when I want to have a real conversation. I want to have a real conversation. And, we met just the other week through one of the programs that we're both in, and we had a great conversation around the business that you're building, your journey in life. What it's like to be a rebel out there and how that's you. And when I think about the outliers, pioneers, and mavericks that are listening to this here, a lot of the things that you were talking about really resonated as insights or challenges and also aspirations that our people are going through. So I wanted to just create. I'm glad you said yes. Just give us some time to get to know each other a little bit better. By exploring each other together and also just having a really real conversation and see how do you create success when you're choosing to stand alone, stand out, or stand apart from all the rest of your peers. Sound good to you?
Fantastic.
All right, cool. So typically here we would start off with a bio about all the things that you've done and such, and I'm going to leave that part out for now. I trust that the successes and such will come in there, and we'll create some space for that. but I would love for people to get to know you. And part of the way that I'm looking to explore that here is getting an idea as to like, what do you stand for, Christy? Right? So I've been calling it an unconventional truth. What is an unconventional truth that you know that few other people agree with you?
I would say the fact that a lot of people think external circumstances, like where they live, how much money they make, who they know, are all of these things are like responsible for their happiness or how successful they are. I think generally people believe that to be true, and they find a lot of excuses. But I really believe 100% of what you create in your life is around your mindset. It's around the way you approach things and what you believe, and what you believe to be possible. And I will tell you, I didn't always believe that, but I know that to be true now.
So it's like the external, we're searching for the external part to bring us happiness, but what I'm hearing from you is that it's around the mindset. If you get the mindset right, the rest of it comes along. Is that right?
Well, you hit it right there. It's nothing that's outside of us. It's completely inside of us. And we have to tap into that. We already have everything that we need. Like we've always had it. And it's just knowing that, it's believing that, knowing it's there, and being able to tap into that. So
I find myself right now really curious as to like, how do you bring that to life through your business, through the people that you're serving, and basically, how do you bring that to life through the work that you do?
Yeah, well, I mean, to give a little background, I do sales coaching for individuals and businesses. So on the outside, it would sound like, hey, that's like a really great question. How would you do something like that? But it's interesting because my background was in corporate sales for like 15 years. And I went through a process where I started my own business, and we can talk about that later. But I realized that even with something like sales, a lot of people are like, sales is a numbers game. It's this, it's like following the process, it's laying out the numbers. And it is that in some sense. I would say 20% of it is that. 80% of it is the way you approach it, I would say, like energetically, and how you mentally are dealing with it. So that has to do with like how confident you are, how much you trust yourself, trusting your intuition. If you look at any, and it's funny, I know many people through my career, my contacts who manage sales teams, and I'll ask them like, what's the difference in someone who's really, really amazing or someone who's just kind of getting by? And they'll say again and again, it's like the people who understand, like anyone can understand the basics, the numbers behind it. The basic tactics. Like you can be okay, and you can also totally fail. But the people who really, really get it are able to form like deep connections with people, and they really just have this like inner confidence and trust in themselves. So that's what I try to bring out through my work.
Yeah, it's really interesting there, because it's like when I hear you talk about the tactics, it feels like that's like the external things. These are things that I'm supposed to do in order to get these results. And
yeah.
What I'm hearing from you instead, it's actually about like 80% of it being the energetics, the mental, like how, like who you're being, and that deep connection that's out there.
Yeah.
That's really interesting here. I think you mentioned confidence right now, and I would be really curious to hear a little bit about like how you look at confidence, especially within the work that you do, and also like perhaps also more from your experience of it all. But I'm really curious as to like how confidence comes to play for you, and what confidence really looks like for you in this.
Yeah, I was thinking that too when I said that. I was like, some people look at confidence a different way than I do. So, I mean, I think some people look at confidence as like, like ego, right? Or like how you present yourself, or just like looking good. But I think you can tell the difference between someone who has like a fake confidence, and I'm not talking about fake it till you make it. I'm talking about people who are like putting their ego out there and have this like false confidence. And then you see people who have like a deep inner confidence. And you can feel it, or I can feel it with people. I think people pick up on it for sure, but I'm talking about like a deep inner confidence. And I would say that has mostly to do with trusting yourself. That's like a process I've gone through just over the years, and realizing for me, that is like the number one most important thing, that I trust myself. And that means trusting my intuition, even when it's like conflicting with my logical brain and what I think I should be doing. And just trusting that like I'm not just doing this alone. Like you had mentioned that before, like kind of on an entrepreneurial journey, a lot of times we're on our own, but we're not ever alone, right? We're tapped into, I believe, like the power of everything. Some people would call that God, some people would call that like the universe, or, you know, there's all these different names, but I think when you tap into this universal energy, and now I feel like we're going like super deep, like
Yeah,
very
that's if we're gonna go anywhere, let's go deep. Like it's
but but yeah, like trusting that you have support all around you, right? It's not just you. You're never doing it alone. And that's like the power of that trust, is trusting, hey, I'm supported. I have everything that I need at my disposal, and just like, you know, and feeling it, believing it.
yeah, you know, Christina, I'm really happy that you did say, like, I feel like we're getting really deep here because
I just felt like I went there right away.
yeah, but
Like that.
that's the game, and like I would love to create that space here because, like, quite frankly, it's like, let's, in my mind, if our conversation is something that anyone can just easily Google and be like, here goes the 5 steps to, you know, becoming a confident in your sales, like, and I don't think we're actually creating any new value here. So like
Right.
there's something about what you said here, like your willingness to go deep. I would love to play with that, man. There's some elements in here that I'm like, ooh, this sounds really interesting. And I get it from one level, and I'm also really curious how you came to that understanding. When I think about, yeah,
Yeah.
let me leave it to that. Let me leave it at that. There. Like, how did you come to this understanding?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't think anyone's asked me that. And I would say it's definitely been a process, right? Part of it has been having this like deep thought about, like, you know, if I'm teaching this, it's really funny. So I teach online courses, are one of the things that I do. And the very first course that I started kind of just flowed through me. And I'll just explain kind of how it happened. I didn't know what I wanted to do or what I wanted to teach. I knew I wanted to leave my corporate career and start my own company. I didn't know what it was going to be about. I kind of had this inkling, like, maybe I'm going to talk about sales. I was like, I don't even know if there's enough there to, like, that I can even talk about it. So I'm like, I'm just going to, at the time, Periscope, which is like before Facebook Live, was very popular. I think it was like kind of new. And I was like, I'm just going to start talking about it on Periscope because no one really knows me there. And I'm going to just see if I have anything to say, and like, what, if anyone tunes in, if anyone asks questions. I just want to see what happens. And it was really interesting because it's like these things that you think, you're like, I don't know if I know this well enough. I was like, wow, like it's almost like an outline kind of like flowed through. And I kind of right away, I realized, I was like, it's confidence. It's not about the tactics. And it's funny, then I had to go back and validate this with all these people that I knew, but I just had this like intuitive knowing, like, hey, this is what it's about. But then I had to think about that. And I was like, shit, what is confidence about? Like, where does that come from? And how is that shaped like in our lives? And it's really interesting because I'm an introvert. So, and I also used to be like extremely shy. And so I really thought about that and did a lot of research and just read a lot and talked to a lot of people. And I was like, God, where does this come from? Like this confidence, because it's not a, you know, a yes or no. It's not like you're 100% confident. Like we're all somewhere on a scale, and it's always shifting, right? And it not just on where we are in our lives, but who we're talking to, what situation we're in. You know, like if I go and present to a room full of doctors, I'm going to be not quite as confident as if I'm talking with like my people who I know like get me and are on my same, like know what I'm talking about. So I think it was just from that, like really deep thought and research of like, wow, if this is true, then why am I feeling super confident sometimes and not confident other times? And like, what are the different variables in that? So I think it was just like an ongoing process.
Yeah, and like, thank you for sharing this because some things are coming up for me where you're like, there's something I want to share. Like, I think it's selling. Like, it wasn't even like fully formed, right? And then you chose a platform, and you chose a platform. Like, I love you. Like I didn't really know anyone on there, so that was actually the perfect place for me to start choosing to be visible, right? And you almost as if you started without that confidence in place. Am I getting that right? Like at a certain point.
Oh, 100%. I didn't want to, you know, my platform when I worked in corporate was LinkedIn, right? Everyone I knew and had worked with ever was on LinkedIn. So I was like terrified that someone there from my old world would see it and be like, what the fuck is she talking about? Like, what is this like bullshit? And so yeah, I really wanted to go somewhere where no one would know me. My coach was on there, and I knew she like was 100% like behind me and supported me. So I knew she would like tune in and like kind of be my cheerleader. But even then, sometimes I was like, I don't like even want her to see this one because like I'm just playing around. I just want to see what happens. But yeah, it was just, I kind of wanted anonymous feedback because I wasn't sure and I wasn't confident in it either.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting because like, you know, we're talking about outliers, pioneers, and mavericks here today, and it's like that element of I'll talk about it for myself here. When you're describing this, it's bringing up some of my own journey along the path, and it's like we're known in our world in some type of way. You with LinkedIn and like the various ways that I was out in the world, like we're seen in a certain way, and I'm thinking about. And it's really cool to see how you found like your own way to say, look, there's still something I want to get out here. I don't need to bring this to where I live on a regular basis just yet. I'm gonna find my voice. I'm gonna find my message and just be in a place where you can find some safety and also still remain brave along the way.
Yeah,
that's really interesting there, where it's almost like you found a new place in order for you to just be you and to play a little bit there.
Yeah.
You did use the word play. I think like how did like looking at it from like the standpoint of play and like this experiment, and how did that like
yeah, I mean, I didn't even realize I said that. But that is 100% what it was. So I'm kind of a technology geek. So for me, I was like, oh, fun. And I love online video. So it's funny. I used to sell online video advertising, which is funny. But also I've always loved the power of video because I think I'm an introvert and I get a little overwhelmed in like huge groups. I'm like, video's so awesome. You can like connect with all of these people and still just like be at home. So for me, like even in high school, I was like like we had a TV station and I was like a broadcast person. So I love video. So for me, it's like video, technology, like new stuff. Like this is so fun. I'm just gonna like do whatever. Like I did a cooking show for a while on Periscope because I just also love to cook. So I just messed around and I was like, this is so fun. It's like new technology to play with. Like, let's just see what happens. And I was like, I'm just going to talk and I don't care what people say and we'll see what happens. And it was amazing what happened. But I love that you brought that up because that is the power of play. When you're just doing something for the fun of it, it's like these amazing things happen.
Yeah. And it's been really fun because when I think about play and I think about confidence as well with it, like that like the inner confidence, what I've found is like, when I choose to just allow myself to go in with that mindset of like, let's just have fun, let's do what is fun. There's two things. One of them, I'm not sure how often like confidence comes into matter, like comes into like the equation. And on the other side of it, it's like there's an element of me that like comes off as being far more confident than I actually am because it's not really one of the distinguishing factors. It's like confidence wasn't at play. Confidence wasn't.
Yeah, well, like it's like confidence is naturally there when you're playing and you're having fun. It's like it doesn't. Well, there's no sense of trying to be confident, right? Or like worrying about how you're presented. It's just like you are, because I think everyone is confident in themselves, like in our core being, right? And when you're in play, you're in that zone, right? You're just having fun and not worrying about what are people thinking? Do I have to like look a certain way, right? So you are like the most naturally confident, I would say, in that kind of scenario.
Yeah. Yeah, Christine, like as we're talking here, I'm getting even more excited here. And you kind of brought up a couple different things around the world that you play in, the world that people that you serve. And you talked a little bit about selling, you mentioned introvert and you being an introvert a few times, talk about the confidence. If we were in this moment, going to get an understanding of like who you are and like who you serve in the world, like how would you go ahead and describe it?
Ooh, that's a great question. I would say because I was just recently talking to people and we were trying to say like, what is like your gift in like a sentence? And I was saying mine is like, I can make people realize, or not make people, but I can help people realize that they have everything that they need inside of them, right? And that I help facilitate them finding that, so that they can do whatever that they want in their life, in their business, in their relationships, right? And it's so funny because I also am a rebel. Like, I don't believe in doing things the way other people do them. And sometimes that's a struggle for me to even do things for myself, because I just can't follow the way other people do things. I'm just like naturally resistant. I just cannot. Because when you were talking before, like a thought came up of, how people see us. And I remember one guy I worked with was like, and this was such a gift that he told me, he's like, it doesn't matter what we're doing, Christine, you're just always going to tell us like what it's like and how it is, even if no one agrees with you. And he's like, I love that about you. I'm like, wow, I didn't know that was so obvious. Because I would always try to play it down a little bit and be like a little bit diplomatic, but apparently I was not.
And it's something
so I thought that
really, like, I feel like it's really interesting because it's like this thing that you're playing down, that you're like, oh, this, like, let me put this thing over to the side, or let me like push it down, like I'll be diplomatic. It's like, no, it still rings true as like, this is who you are,
Yes, it's so true. And I ended up writing an article about how you think like your biggest flaw might be your like most amazing feature. And I wrote an article about that, because I think that's so true. I always thought that was why I wasn't more successful in the corporate world, because I was like, I can't just like go along. I can't, people say like, oh, you have to play this political game and you have to keep your head down and do the work. And I was like, I can't do it. I can't do it that way. It's like against my nature. And I always thought like, that's why I couldn't stay in it. But I think that's why I could stay in it for that long, because of that. And just having him say that, he was like, yeah, like it's so obvious. And I realized that was my value, really.
It's really fun because I know a little bit about your story, and I know that like, over those 15 years, it wasn't just like you were like kind of stagnant in the same role and just kind of like rinsing and repeating. Like you were growing, you were doing different things, and you were doing it in that natural rebel way that you had. And I think what's coming up for me as you're saying this is like, it wasn't that he's like, hey, just so you know, like you're saying this is how it has to be, and you're going to share the way that you see the world, like in that moment. The element that really gets me is at the very end. He's like, and I love it. I love that about you.
Yeah.
I feel like that's a place where it's harder. These things that we're pushing aside, it feels like they don't have place, and yet at the same time, it's the things that make people actually want us more in the room. So you're talking about like I hear like you're really able to help people find their strengths. I love how you jump into like, here's one of my greatest strengths out here. How do you like? You had to talk about this here, either for yourself or with other people that you work with. Like, how have you found ways to help us embrace that part of us that we've been looking to push off for a while?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because I keep like playing around with different ideas. So sometimes, because everyone's different and everyone sees things in different ways. So I look at it at all different angles. So sometimes it's, looking at what other people say about you. And I do these workshops, and we'll go through these things where we talk about like, well, what do your customers say about you? Like, what do your friends say about you? What do people always go to you for that they never go to someone else for, right? So sometimes it's looking at externally, like, how are people seeing you? Because it's something a lot of us like never really think about, right? We don't like maybe some people do. I don't know. I don't like sit there and think like, what are people like thinking about me? But if someone pulls it out of me and I do like an exercise around it, then I'm like, oh, okay, right. Because I think it's so easy. Like we tend to I think as humans, I think it's just a natural tendency to remember all the negative things way more easier than the positive things. And I've seen this again and again with people I've coached. It's like they see all the crappy things that happened all week, but then there's like 3 like absolutely phenomenal things, and they're like, oh yeah, and like I also made $10,000 and signed up 3 clients. You're like, yeah. So I think part of it
you'll feel that one there, right?
So part of it is kind of like making people pay attention to that, or just like showing them, hey, that's part of it. and then people get just like inspiration from different things too. I was just recently at this conference and I loved this guy. He said, he has this like little sticky note on his computer and he said like, who needs me to be on my A game today? Right. And I was like, oh, I love that, because sometimes the reality is our like external, like people in our life are what motivates us. Like for me, it's my kids, right? Like the reason I knew I had to really finally leave my corporate job is because my son would ask me like, what is work? Which is like a really like vague question. And I could have given him some answer like, oh, it's where I go every day. But I would like deeply thought about it. And I was like, how do I explain this to him in a way that, because I would tell him your work is to go play. And I was like, wait a minute, my work is to go play too. So why am I not doing that right now? And so I had these like really deep like thoughts like, well, how do I explain what I'm doing now? And like, why am I not saying work is play? And it took me a couple weeks to be like, whoa, like, why am I telling him something different? He's 2, but my job is play too. So like, you know, it's figuring out what motivates you and recognizing your strengths, even though it's like hard to look at. So I think it's like, it's a couple different things. And it's still something I'm trying to figure out. I'm like, there's other things too that, that I kind of go through in my program. Things like, you know, having like making sure you have like little successes along the way and recognizing them, because I think a lot of people don't take baby steps or like get momentum early enough on and they get discouraged. But that's like kind of something I teach in my program.
Yeah, and I'm really curious about this program here. There's an element here that I'm probably going to walk away here, where it's like your work is your play, you know, or your work is to play. And I think that's a really interesting way of looking at the world. To get you to this place here, and so I'm curious about that right now. So let's take a look where you are right now. Tell me a little bit about the world that you've created, the world of play that you've created for yourself and for your clients here. You kind of like hit that at your program here. I'd love to find a little bit more about I'm curious about that. Can you share a little bit more about it?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is so perfect. This came up because this is like the reminder I needed today too, where like whenever I coach someone or I do a podcast, and I don't know if you find this to be true too, there's always like one nugget of wisdom where I was like, oh yeah, that was meant for me to like really pay attention to. So that was that. So yeah, so for me, like I said, I'm like kind of a tech geek. So I love new technology. I do like online courses because I think that's fun. I like figuring shit out and like tinkering with stuff online. So for me, that is fun. But I also love like having the freedom to have my own schedule. So I love to be outside in nature. I live in Northern California. I love to go hiking. So for me, there are times when I'm like, my work today is like to go on a hike and be in nature, or like bring my kids to the swimming pool and like be in the sun, or you know, and I struggled a lot with like these online programs because there's definitely ways that people think you should do it. There are certain structures where like you have to do it this way, but my rebel self does not allow me to do it in exactly that way. I can't. I mean, people will say like, you didn't follow the structure, like you didn't do the steps. I'm like, yeah, like I can't. You told me to do them. It's impossible. So I have to like, yeah, part of my fun is like figuring out how to do things my own way. And so this has been a process. I mean, I didn't figure it out in the beginning. Luckily, part of my fun is figuring things out, so that's good. But in the beginning, you know, I sold like online classes, and I was like, I like this, but I don't like that I don't have connection with people. I really deeply love like talking and connecting with people and seeing like the transformation they're going through and hearing about their breakthroughs, and not being able to talk to them and just having a course. Even though I would do it live sometimes, I was like, I need more from my people. I want to feel them more. And so I changed my course like recently to do much more intensive work with less people, because I was like, I want to work really closely. Like some of these people will take a class from me for 6 weeks and then they're gone. And I'm like, I miss you. I want to hear more about what's happening. I want to hear what the next step is for you. Like, I don't want you to disappear, because I want to keep working together. So, I mean, we keep in touch on like Facebook groups and things like that. But yeah, it's been a process for me to find out what it's kind of amazing. If you can create anything, like what would you create, right? And that's kind of how I have tried to look at it. Another thing that I really love, and this was another challenge that I came with when I first started doing online classes. I worked with a coach who was like, well, you can't just sell like mindset stuff. You have to be like a really well-known author or like public figure to do that. And I was like, that's what I really love talking about. And the more I started talking about it, the more like excited I got, and the more people who came to me. So that was another thing where, you know, everyone told me, well, not everybody, but some people were telling me like, oh, you shouldn't really focus on that. But I'm like, that's all it's about. And that's what I really love talking about. So
Yeah. And like when you say that there, like there's a lot that I can literally feel some energy moving in my body right now. And it's really interesting to me, Christina. I'm going to call myself out here because I can hear my language here. And there's an element here of like, what's coming up for me? I can really feel some energy in my body. And I'm not supposed to be able to say that. I'm not supposed to be saying that as a podcast. I was like, I'm not like, this is real for me.
mm-hmm.
This is like the energetics of what you're saying are really coming through beyond just like, beyond just the words here. And it's really landed. So I want to reflect that back as a gift that you're giving me, and also
awesome, thank you.
Yeah, and to demonstrate like honestly, like you're saying, 80% of it is energetic and mental. Like I'm actually feeling that in this moment. And what came up for me, like, hey, so we use the word rebel. Like right now, I'm hearing a lot of maverick coming up. You're like, I'm gonna just do it my way. Don't do it like it's like I get that there's a path, you know. A lot of times I look at it, I'm like, there are principles out there that yes, they need to get done. Like in order to make money, you need to like receive money. Like there's certain principles that need to take place.
Absolutely.
But how you honor those principles, like that's up to you. And I feel like that's where you're like I'm getting a sense of that along the way there. And I want to call that out. I want to call that out as one thing that I'm picking up here. There are a few other things that I want to also just pull out based on what you're saying. The second thing that came up for me was really around, you hear and know that you can't really build a business. You can't really like have a positioning around mindset and working around things. Yeah, that's where you are energetically focused. That's where like it seems like there's just a passion there when it comes back to even like your unconventional truth. It's a big part of who you are and what you stand for. But what I'm hearing from you is that you also chose to make yourself visible in a way to say, look, to not just believe it, but to start speaking to it, to let your people find you based on that.
Yes. Yeah. And that was like, another element of, you know, like what's fun for me. It's like fun to talk about that stuff. Like I love having conversations about kind of like how your beliefs create reality and, you know, like what that means in your business and how you do that. Like that's like the most fun conversation for me. And so I was like, well, I'm going to talk about that because that's fun. That's what I want to talk about.
Yeah. Yeah, and like one of the things that excited me so much around us when we first met was just like how the word ease comes to mind a lot whenever I talk to you. Seeing like, I can see now where it's like, oh, your work is to go play, or like this is what's fun for me. Like I can see why I get that sense from you, but I feel I feel more relaxed in terms of what I can do with my business, like what things that I can do that are completely unique within my business, that are like the Nemo way of going about it, that can still just be fun. And I want to thank you for that, because there's this element of it that where it's like in how you're being and in choosing to have these conversations and choosing to go really deep right off the bat. You know, it's giving us a chance to, I'll be honest, it's giving me even more space. Like I'm realizing just how much I'm playing in this conversation with you and trying to put it in all that. And I'm like, one thing about you that is just really palpable is like your ability to create the space for people to show up as they want to, because you're choosing to show up as you want to. I want to just thank you for that. I want to acknowledge you on that. I want to thank you for that.
Oh, thank you. And you know, I have to bring one thing up because you sent a little survey beforehand, and I had this huge insight. So you wrote something about like the 3 biggest accomplishments. And when I worked in sales, I easily sold over $100 million in advertising sales. And part of it was like the type of advertising I sold, but I mean, it was a shitload. Like I am really good at what I did. I do now, and I was very good at in that role as well. And I wrote that I did it with ease. And it wasn't until you just said that right now that it clicked, because I felt guilty for so long because I felt like I didn't work as hard as everyone else. And I was able to always like meet my, because when you work in sales, you have a sales quota or a number. So I always met and exceeded my number. It was never hard. And I felt like, I mean, honestly, a big reason that I quit was because it was so easy. And I was like, this is not, I am not living up to my potential. I'm not doing what I love. And I'm like, this is so boring. It's like, it's the easiest job in the world. And I always felt like a little bit of guilt around it, like a little bit like, oh my, like, you know, because we got paid out an outrageous amount of money. You know, you kind of worked in that industry too. And it wasn't until now that I realized like it was just easy for me because it could be, that's how I wanted it to be.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Like,
yeah, thank you. That was amazing. Thank you. I did just realize that.
It's like, as you're saying, there's a part of me that comes up a lot with my clients, a lot of the outliers, pioneers and mavericks, where it's like, we are sold a story on like, it's only worth it if you're working hard. You know, if it feels hard, if it feels difficult, like you need to toil, and it needs to come to you years down the line, and then you're gonna get this one carrot for all the work that you've done up to this point. And what I'm hearing from you is that like you've shown up in the world in such a way where you've chosen to do things differently. You've chosen to, and because you've done it differently, it's allowed you to do things in a way that's fun, that's playful, and full of ease for you. You've been able to bring in $100 million worth of sales like on a regular basis. Like, it's just what you do. And it's like, and at the same time, like, there's some people who will be struggling to sell $1 million, right? And it's like, and there's something really real here. I want to just acknowledge you for what you've accomplished here this year. And actually, to be honest, it's less about what you've accomplished. It's part of why we didn't start this whole thing out with like your professional bio.
Yeah.
For me, what I really want to acknowledge you on is how you accomplished that.
Yeah. Thank you.
It's really interesting because it's like it is really true, Christine. When I think about you, that's the feeling that comes up. It's like, I know that I can build a business by working really hard. I know that I can go out there and, you know, do all of the, you know, do the 3-step process as well as like the 15-step process. And someone's 3-step process is going to be, for me, just won't feel right. And in trying to implement that, all of a sudden becomes like the hardest process ever, even though it looks clear to me, you know?
Yeah.
So,
and I will say, I mean, I've seen definitely people, and in the sales world, this is very clear. You see people who are just hustlers. They just work. And I had a boss like this who was just amazing. But he was successful because he believed he had to hustle. He thought that was the only way to do it. And he's such a wonderful person. And he would just work his butt off. And but it was very clear, like it was so visible to me that he had that belief. He had to do that in order to be successful. And it's just like, there's certain people who just, if you believe that that's the case, then that is the case. And he would always say, well, one day you're going to be my boss, so it doesn't matter. But I was like, you won't have to work as hard. It'll be easier then.
I love that this is coming out, because I think that it's just, I think our world and our businesses and our lives and our families and the things that we do, it's so much, there's something on the other side of difficulty. It's like, there's ease on the other side. Like when you're so in it, when you're so in flow. Thank you for calling that out. Thank you for taking us here. I'd love to explore with you here a little bit more about like what's coming up next for you. So I'm understanding that you have setting up these programs for you here. There's all throughout what you do is ease. There's the confidence. There's how do you actually make these sales? And I'm curious for you at your next level. What's coming up next for you? What's the challenge that really will be calling forth more Christine to show up to the table?
Yeah, I mean, that's such a great question. It's so funny that like a couple things in my life has just magically happened that have led me in this other direction. So I love working with individuals and my coaches specifically to help them scale their businesses. So that's one part of my business. And I left the corporate world because I was really feeling like disconnected and I would say kind of hurt, which is weird. Like you're not hurt by an environment, but I felt like I wasn't taken care of. And I see now that part of that was my mindset around it. And so I always stayed away, even though I have so many contacts in that world. And I live in the San Francisco Bay Area. Like it's kind of, I was always kind of like shaming myself, like for not wanting to do anything in that area. But I had so much resistance in my heart because I was like, I was really unhappy. And there were a lot of situations that made me really unhappy. And that's why I eventually left. But now it's funny, a very large company has approached me to help them with a couple things. And I can't go into all the details now, but it's very interesting timing because I'm in a point now where I'm looking at that and seeing like that was kind of my beliefs around that environment, right? And I hear people say that all the time. I hear people say things like, oh, to be successful in the corporate world, you have to like sacrifice your integrity, for example. I've heard many people say that. Or you have to play this political game and like do things you don't agree with. And I think that that's true if you believe it's true. But I see now that that was like a big struggle for me too. And I kind of bought into some of that stuff. And now I'm seeing like, hey, this is such a gift. So it started out with me being interviewed on this podcast for this large company. And I think it's coming out next week. I don't know. I won't mention who it is, but it was funny. There was like one moment at the end of the podcast where she asked me, and this is like a large sales company, and she asked me, what's one thing that you wished you knew earlier in your career that like would have changed everything? And I said instantly, I said, well, I wish that I had trusted myself 100% in every situation. And in that moment, I knew that was like an amazing gift for all of these people who work in the corporate world. And I kind of felt less like, oh, maybe I want to help these people now because I'm seeing it a little bit differently. So that's kind of like, I definitely still have resistance around it because that's definitely a place as a rebel where it's like a little bit of a challenge because you have to, people have certain expectations. But there are also many very successful rebels who have worked in the corporate environment. So for me, that's like my new challenge is to approach this world that I walked away from and I really wanted to completely disconnect from and find ease there and fun because I think it's there and I want to bring that to those people. But definitely there's like a lot of resistance that comes up for me and that I'm not 100% there. But it's funny that these opportunities keep showing up.
It's funny, and at the same time, like it doesn't surprise me. It doesn't surprise me.
It does not surprise me either.
Yeah, I'm like, it feels like it doesn't surprise me because you keep showing up.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of different things that could have been said even in response to that question there. And I think if we at this point here, like, actually, let's let that go. But there's a lot of different things that could have been said in response to that question. And really, right there, your truth like just came out.
Yeah, I didn't talk about that.
Yeah. It was just like, boom, this is it. It's like it can be this way. And it's really interesting. It's interesting because it's also like, it's almost like in the standpoint of what you were saying earlier, where you're like, oh, I was trying to be political and I was trying to I was trying to come off a certain way. And a colleague just came out and said, hey, by the way, like what I love about you is X, Y, and Z. Right? So it's like I feel that continues to just come straightforward off for you. It's like I didn't know you were going to talk about ease. I didn't know that. Like I didn't know that was going to be your response about this. I didn't know that like this is the kind of work that being able to help you find fun and ease again back in the corporate world. Like I didn't know that where you're going, and yet at the same time, it's this thing that's like uniquely you, and it's like, and there's a lot of other people like, yeah, it's just really fun being able to see that there. Can I ask you here, in terms of the Lisa you're running up against here, as you're looking into your edge here, we won't have time to go through and go into more deeply in this conversation, but I'd love for like if you're comfortable with this here, just to put it out for all of us that are listening here, all of us that are like kind of seeing ourselves as either a rebel in some state here, and we you believe something different than the environment that you might be walking into. Right?
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to that, there, what's the question I want to ask you? Is the question that comes to mind. I see this as a unique place to be, and so just kind of going back either through your own personal journey, or what it looks like to be a rebel for you in this state here. How do you see yourself being able to bring both of those to the table in this new environment?
Yeah, I mean, that's something I've been struggling with even this week, because I think we all have this struggle where we have our, I would say, our logical minds, and then we have our heart space, which I think is where our intuition lives. Some people would say that's your subconscious. And I think there's a big argument going on all the time. And sometimes I have really big conflicts where it's this logically does not make sense, but my heart's but you should do it anyway. And so for me, it's making sure I'm in a space where I can hear my intuition, because I'm sure that this is many people experience this. When I get stressed or worried about something, I'm very much in my head. I mean, it's all in my logical brain, and I call it spinning. I'm spinning around thinking, trying to sort out the problem in my logical head instead of feeling it in my heart, right? And feeling the answer. And I've gotten much, much better at it over the years, recognizing, okay, now I see what I'm doing. I see I'm in my head, but how the fuck do I get out of it? Because sometimes it's really, really hard, especially I find when you're going through a really big growth period, where in the last, I would say 6 months, I've gone through a really intense growth period. And I find that's when I have this resistance come up even more. And it's really, really strong. And I'm wow.
Yeah.
So that, and I always think oh, I've mastered this now. I'm good with this part. I can get out of my head. But then when you go through this big growth period, it comes back again in a different way. And so for me, it's always coming back to okay, how do for me, I say it's grounding myself and allowing myself to just step back for a minute. Because sometimes it's not something that can be solved by sitting in front of the computer, by doing more work.
Yeah.
It's really saying no, you probably have to take an extra nap and go for a walk instead. And that's gonna, and you might have to do that for a couple weeks, which for me, I'm I want it to be done already. So that is a little bit of where I am right now, where I'm trying to step back a little bit and really get in tune with this, because with my heart space, because I know there's some big stuff coming up.
Yeah, I hear you on that. Christine, I'm going to do something that makes me a little uncomfortable here, and I'm going to do it because, I'm like, we got to play, right? And the part that makes me uncomfortable is really to sit out here and say, we have 5 minutes left in our conversation. Mm-hmm. I would love to come in and say, come from a place and put it on my coach hat for 3 minutes of this conversation. It's a speed
okay.
3 minutes. I have no clue what's going to happen, but this is my edge, right? I like to think about this as the edge. This is my edge to come out here and be okay, let's do something. And I could tell that I've been pushing this off until the last 5 minutes. So would you be willing to play for the next three minutes or so?
Absolutely, yeah.
Cool. So let's get into this here. You're saying that you're spinning, and you're saying that you're feeling resistance. You had to bottom line it right now in this moment right here. What you feel. What is the resistance that you're feeling? Put a sentence or put a word to it.
What is the resistance?
Yeah, you know, describe it.
I think it's resistance to stepping into a more vulnerable stage, I guess. Which, that's funny, I wouldn't have thought that. I just said that, but it's interesting. I feel being in that, when I think about going back into the corporate world, it feels more vulnerable to me, which I'm not sure why, but I think that's what I kind of have resistance to.
When you say vulnerable, just to help me see this a little bit more, in what way is it in what way is it more vulnerable?
I think because a lot of people have known me there for a long time and I have a perception that they see me in a certain way. Funny, you actually pointed out they probably actually see me more clearly than I think, but that will be a big shift to like come out. You know, I went through a very big process where I thought, you know, these are the people whose opinions that I value, but maybe those are the wrong people to be looking at. It's more important to know what I value. So I went through a process where I was like, I have to disconnect from what I think this world would approve of, because it doesn't matter. You know, I was kind of looking at like, oh, these people might judge me or think certain things about me, and I was feeling like very uncomfortable about that. I remember when I first started my business, so I really started to, in a way, I don't want to even use the word like demonize, but that's just what comes up. I was trying to say like, these people don't matter, but not that they don't matter, but like what I feel matters the most. And so going back into that space where I really disconnected, I think feels very uncomfortable.
Yeah, I get that. And it's like, and even hearing this, when you put it in this terms, it kind of reminds me of like the LinkedIn periscope. It's like you've been able to leave that world and just be you and play. And now you're going back into, okay, hold on. Now you're going to see me again.
Yep.
You're going to see me here. And I think one of the fun things is, I can definitely promise you, is that they will judge you. That's fun. Like, and it's just to like put that out there, right? When I like in just calling that out there for what it is. Just a real quick question on that. Is there anything that comes to mind when I say that to you? When I say like, yeah, they will judge you. Like you are entering back in there, and there will be judgment.
Yeah, well, what came up for me was that and I realized this a long time ago, I kind of had a mask that I wore when I worked in those jobs. And I like, you know, I'd present myself a certain way, and I never was truly vulnerable and like really never talked about like feelings, hardly ever. And I can't behave that way anymore. I can't go into any situation and act like that anymore, because now I've like taken that off. So I'm like, okay. Like, it's just going back into that place where you were always one person. It's like, I'm a different person. Now I'm my true self, actually. Like, I'm not pretending to be someone else. So it's interesting. That's what kind of came up. I was like, that's why I feel so uncomfortable, because I was, but again, a lot of that was my perception. Now I'm seeing like, I think people kind of knew who I was anyway. And, but I thought I was doing a really good job pretending that I was like, you know, this very put together, polished person who always like was confident and did things a certain way.
Yeah, and you are that. And like where you're really powerful is in everything else that makes you you, Christine. I love that you bring it up there. Thank you for being willing to play. Yeah. Thank you for being willing to play with me. I can actually feel something in me, like there was a resistance there, and I'm like, I just gotta do this. So thank you here. I know that there's so much more that we could have gone into, and I want to acknowledge you really quickly here, and then I want to give you a chance to just share anything else with anyone that's listening here, because I do believe that there's at least one person whose life you have changed through showing up in the way that you have, being able to be someone who's been so successful in life and to still talk about the real things that are going on, the real mindsets that hold you back, the limiting beliefs, the things that come up even now as you know, it's like, wow, you've got this large company to take you on and to do something. You still are facing these same challenges as to how do I be in this space? And are they going to and I want to just acknowledge you for being someone who has created a lot of external success, and is still willing to go on the inner journey that goes along with it. Thank you so much for showing up that way. I acknowledge.
Yeah, thank you.
After that person. Yeah. So Christine, I'd love to just, I know that there's someone out there that would benefit greatly from working with you or for continuing on with you in some way, shape, or form. So if that one person was listening right now, what would you need to say to that person, and how can that person continue the conversation?
So I would tell that one person that they already know what they need. they have everything that they need inside of them, and they just need to find a place where they can hear that. So a quiet place, it might be in nature, it might be in a laundry room, it might be in a basement. But hearing like what your soul or your heart wants to say is, I mean, like it's screaming and you're just not hearing it. And you really just have to listen. So I would say that. Yeah, and if that helps that one person, then this is 100% worth it.
Absolutely. And I'm going to call something really quickly out here, Christine, because I also heard with you, some of the way that you also got space was you found a coach. You mentioned your coach multiple times throughout here, right? Mm-hmm. So like, you know, like that's also a possibility. And I'll say it on your behalf here. Like, I know what it's like to spend time in your presence and how things change just by being around you. So,
thank you.
Absolutely. And I don't mind putting it out there on behalf of that person to really know, like, space can look at like a lot of different things. And so, Christine, if that was the case, if the person wanted to continue a conversation with you, or if anyone was just interested in seeing more of the work that you're doing and find out more about like, how they can show up differently and
yeah, so you can go to my website. It's soulfulselling.com. So SOULFUL selling. Or I'm on social media. So you can, Christine Volden is a pretty unique name. So you can find me on Facebook and just send me a Facebook message and I will respond. So yeah, I look forward to talking to anyone, and there's tons of like free training videos and things on my website. So lots of information there.
Awesome. And your last name, VOLDEN.
Yep, Volden, just like it sounds. Simple, it's easy.
I like that. I like that there. Well, thank you. Thank you for doing your work here by playing with us here today. Thank you so fully. I'm looking forward to whatever else comes up from both of us here. Right?
Awesome. This was so fun.
Definitely.